All right, in this video, we're going to talk about the correct, then embellish philosophy, I guess. This is a general mentality I have when I'm mixing anything. I'm going to showcase it in this video on some guitars, some like pokey 3K stuff. We had some guitars that were submitted to me by someone who's going through my mentoring program. And I was like, oh, I bet a lot of people would sort of like to know about this because it's something that I use all over the place. This philosophy, this mentality, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to showcase it here in a second. But the general premise is that before we go doing broad brush stroke like EQ, where we're shaping things in a big way, or we're compressing things, or whatever it is, we got to take care of the little stuff. We got to get like surgical with it, as they call it. So let's look at some guitars. I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so the guitars we're going to be focusing on here are these guys. These are rhythm guitars. This is a really cool like indie rock song. I'm just currently working, like I said, with someone who's in the mentoring program on dialing in the guitars on the instrumental at the moment. This is supposed to be like lo-fi hi-fi. That's kind of like an in vogue thing right now. I'll play a little bit of this. Cool. So you get the general vibe. And this is with the guitars after I've corrected them. So I'm going to solo a guitar here and I'm going to disable everything I got. And we're going to listen to just this guitar. I'm also going to toss it into the center so we can hear it better. Okay, so it's a really cool tone, but it's got some like piercy sort of stuff going on. So here in FabFilter Pro Q3, basically the world's favorite digital EQ at this point, I'm going to play it and we're going to kind of look at what we're listening to. So you can see this stuff right away, right? We have these massive peaks, spikes, harmonic spikes, whatever you want to call them, right around this 3K area. And I just kind of wanted to play this and show you that before I showed you like what I did to go about fixing it. And it's Pro Q is so cool, right? Because we can just sort of see like we are disproportionately loud in this particular area, right? The rest, is down here. 3K, that's up here. Another really cool thing we can do, you can see this peak is right at 3K. I'm going to train your ears. So you might have to turn this up. I'm going to notch this, right where we kind of have that like dominant sort of whistle sound. We're going to make a notch, right? I'm going to play this. I think we can sort of all agree that is not very pleasant. And now I'm going to bypass it. And when I bypass it, you should hear a huge difference. Especially in this passage here. I'm going to do this one more time. Even though we can notch that, that's sort of like a static adjustment, which I don't love given how dynamic the guitar performance is. Check this out. It's not the only offender, right? It's got some buddies, right? This is an offender, that's an offender, a couple other offenders over here. We can smooth all this stuff out. And this is sort of that like correct before we embellish thing. This is all going to be sort of part of the correction part of this. All right, so given that the performance is pretty dynamic, I'm going to handle this dynamically. So what I've done here is I've used Soothe. I'm going to hone in right on this 3K area. I've gone really, really sharp. And check this out. As you can see, I am sort of attenuating all of those peaks dynamically. So you can kind of think of Soothe as like an inverse EQ, and depending on how you set it is where it's going to treat the attenuation of what would otherwise be these harmonic spikes. So we've got this one sort of handling the general whistle. Yet another instance of Soothe. Now that we've sort of done the surgical whistle, we'll call this the general whistle pat down. We're treating this one much more like a dynamic EQ. And you can see here, right? We're not going to sharp. And this is just working. We could almost do this in FabFilter. This is working like a dynamic EQ. And then speaking of dynamic EQ in FabFilter, I've got one more. And you might be saying like, damn, like 3 EQs all in the same place. They're all doing different things and they're all doing less and less aggressive things. So this one's only going down probably max about 3 dB, right? And subsequently, we're going from, as I said, correcting, right? Where we were really getting like notchy, if you will, notchy by nature. I'm a dad. I'll be here all day. We're getting notchy by nature on those 3K harmonic spikes. Then we're using soothe again, right? And we're sort of like attenuating that area, like not as like aggressively as the notches, but we are still using soothe, so it's still like reacting to the individual spikes. And then we're just sort of doing like a general pat down of that 3K area with dynamic EQ with FabFilter Pro Q3. I would say all of this combined is fixing the major pain points in the guitar tone. And now we're going to move on to the embellish part of this. So I'm going to use actually a saturator here. This is a really cool saturator called the Oven. And as you can see, I've kind of boosted up the mid burn. We certainly don't need the top burn. The low end's fine. But the reason I'm doing the mid burn, I'm going to show you here. Do you remember when we had this pulled up? FabFilter here. I'm going to bypass the Oven for now. We had a big surplus in 3K, but we were kind of scoopy right here, right? Now this is post our EQ, so you can actually see how much of an improvement we made. This is actually kind of a fun thing to look at, right? Because we've got 1, 2, 3 corrections before we're embellishing, right? We have not yet done the embellish, but you can see those corrections in action. So, but what we can still sort of see is we have a little bit of like a mid scoop here. So let's work on that. And I'm going to work on that with this plugin right here. I'm going to use saturation. I want you to listen for the extra weight that the guitars get by using saturation to fill on that mid scoop. Cool, let's put this all together. So I'm going to start by playing the guitars by themselves. Both of these guitars have the exact same treatment. And when I go like this, they're bypassed. And when you see them and they're blue, they are on. Insane difference with just a couple moves, right? Let's hear that in the mix. So like I said at the beginning of the video, this is a general philosophy I have, right? Let's take care of the irritants, the little details. And then once we do that, we can just do really easy sort of like broadband global EQ, and it's going to work way better for us. Imagine if we were trying to EQ the high mid range and you have all of these like harmonic spikes like jumping out, right? You wouldn't think that you'd be able to boost it. And the reason is because they would just make the spikes so much louder. They would be so piercing and irritating. You'd probably never fix the guitar tone. So this is just a great philosophy. Like I said, it works on vocals, it works on guitars, it works on cymbals. Those are like the big three I can think of, but it should work on mostly anything. And I think it's a great philosophy to adopt when we're working on sort of like trying to correct our tracks and make them more sonically pleasing in general.